choose colors. And here's how you use where she does. Even in this triad color, use saturation levels of each of the three hues varies, creating a color. The orange hues on the main subject has saturation for as a supporting cast. The fading saturation from top to bottom also pulls our attention to its face of the script. Keeps it very and symbols have this. So Yumi doesn't just stop there. Very saturated sprinkle around the character just makes the piece and this easy use framing, just like discussed earlier. Tension with the greens forming square formation lines and it's one of the first paragraph. If you know, so this is just kill the entire piece. If you this is executed it's an course and once we have the foundation set up colors, it's peculiar soft as we all know she loves details. You don't need to tell me this, just take a look at how crazy I assume because just take it. The second thing that she does is facial features, like we talked, except as a character. Umi likes color, and you guys probably know step is for you're going to use them and just the opacity to your liking, or you can the opacity and paint over it. If you look closely into this piece, shadow layer is shaded. It's typical style stuff. I do sketchy. So we can actually can. This I think really suited well and balances. There also tends to be things on each other as they stuff. So be prepared to use it. Just keep in mind that as a layer is a shape for but faded out like this. That sense of distance. Some other random techniques to keep the big swooping shapes with shading and heavy still fade. And with all of that information, it's time to start. I did a quick sketch here with thin to trace the original piece to really understand how we sort of circles and here I really want illustration and keep its essence feature and position that using it's just for so much you should definitely keep this keeping a bright back just like original try different color schemes because it's different so just copy the piece so the details actually went to the Pork City Ancestral and it's 8 nice just in the description. Sorry. And composition from square stuff. And some it's created by I'll say my biggest struggle was still that as well. Stuff. If you think this was helpful, then study interesting to sure you to draw these stuff. Well, in this video, I'll find out exactly how it's fun to draw them, whether it's still Chiluk, soft and or the classic anime jet like. So we'll cover all the styles. First, I'll lead. It's basic enough. It's the ultimate fun to draw perfect eyes every single time. Thanks for today's sponsor, Squarespace, the online for so like I mentioned earlier, let me quickly explain a few key fundamentals about using examples from the film, so we don't end up learning copying styles, but also learn stuff. No matter how crazy these eyes look on the surface, great artists will still always have these same mistakes that show the eyeball sitting inside the socket. And honestly, this is probably keep an eye on for. Most styles out there will show this rounded structure sockets. As you can see here, the edges here always round as we get to the outer ends. This is probably the most feature you keep because it directly shows your understanding of the form of the face. The indent of the brow ridge here is also pretty weird since it's part of the structure, especially for more. This is why there's always that cat's shadow there at the end corners of the eyes. But if you're the type of artist that exclusively draws cute anime girls, I wouldn't worry too much about it since that jumps off for sometimes existing. Next three features involves the eyelashes, and I think of the eyelashes as the frame because they directly show the structure of the eyes, so especially at different angles, which we'll also talk about. The first thing you'll notice about eyelashes is the angle of the curve is quite an. This actually expresses the personality of the character. I talk about this extensively, so make sure to check that out. The eyelashes also cast shadows and detail of your drawings. Some artists like to emphasize the shape of the cat shadow like this, so if they have really exaggerated pictures, it's just one convincing shadow straight. And the last feature are reflections. It's not just the iris, but as well. These things are so naturally they reflect the top of light. This is also one of the key aspects to get this rock towards the end. Now that we're done with the easy part, let's move on to the test of which if you're the person that struggles to get the specs out, adjusting both perspective, then you need to watch this. Here I'll show you some really easy drills you can do to perspective every time. You want to practice top down angles, bottom angles, and angles when the head turns to the side. Using this really simplified shape, I gradually rotate the shapes around the different axes just to get myself more comfortable with different angles. So one thing I'm keeping in mind here is the socket thing and the curve. You see that it becomes as you turn to more of a 45. If you're not comfortable with this yet, you can try tracing first, like what I'm doing. Just keep the lines really simple. Snap as a base, rotate them just a little each time. Using it alongside a 3 so it helps a lot. In Clip Studio, I velocity and rotate it so that I can keep track of the head rotation instead of doing the and then there's movement. The eyes are that contributes to various facial expressions. I don't think I need to explain facial expressions since that should be intuitive. But here I want to point out common mistakes I personally study. First of all, it should be painfully obvious, but there should be space. I often make the mistake of drawing the eyes too close to the brow when they're half closed like this. This makes the eyes look like they're in fully open state, which one messes up the expression I was going for, and it makes the eyes seem smaller than it should be. Another mistake is when a character is smiling, the bottom eyelid should curve up, creating a smile. This is because the cheeks push upwards into the eyes when they smile. This happens even when the character is always smiling slightly. Otherwise, the smile is fake and expressive. Another scenario this will happen is when you look at the character. If we tilt the model like this, you'll see that there's natural N curve at the bottom of the eyes. And just a quick side note on eye shapes. For the longest time, I had this question about the oval versus you see now. So this video here kind of explains why they just keep it with them. Stay spheres. But this actually expands the for stylization, which we'll talk about in a second. Since just the shape of the eyes offers you a ton of customization, I'll show you some really common shapes that we use here and that structure, but it's only half of the equation. Rendering is what makes the final result impact. And by using this four-step system, anyone can easily draw convincing a few adjustments here and there, adding some extra twists. You get pretty much infinite variations of style, just like these 5 things. In terms of layering, it's basic. Some problems. Now, this doesn't mean that it's added in any way. If anything, Suki's ability to make the eyes look so good with so is what we should all strive for here. Suki's style really highlights the importance of structure here because that would basically carry along the drawing. If you don't have a solid structure and perspective, no matter how much effort you put into the rendering, it'll still look bad. With that being said, let's go deeper here and get steps 1. Comparing each of the 5 elements approach now. But before we jump into stylization, a quick thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is the online platform to build a stunning website, showcasing your art portfolio, or launching an entire these beautiful templates and built-in tools for some blogging ships. It makes building your own business effortless. If you're a tech dummy like me, then good news because you don't need to notice. Just drag, drop, and whether you're into fan art, concept art, or full-on art drops, you can make a professional site that actually reflects your style. Head to my link in the description to start your 14-day free trial. Use my code IceBrush to save 10% off your first purchase. Now, the first step is to set up the frame. From here, we can see how each artist have their own way of doing the eyelashes. Suki's eyelashes are actually fancier to secure. There is a base layer here, which is faded out slightly tone. Then on top of this, there's a second layer that pops out. This darker and contrasting. Ami 999 actually has a similar setup, just with some extra slips. There's that same first layer. So now, actually, I think that's. But anyways, on top of that, we have the same just a 6 out like this. So these more individual strands put and these are a perfect opportunity to add some juicy elements because the lashes catches the light. But no matter if the lashes are very detail heavy, like to these, or if they're simple and glowing, I'm just gonna call them these names, man. These names. There's always that same faded ends tips, which you can do easily with an airbrush after. But we added in the curves and it's in lashes using a texture brush like this, which is a quick and easy way to add details. And unlike all the others, Wendy actually treats the bottom lashes with respect. Proportion between upper and lower lashes. Usually it styles the bottom lashes are small. So these bottom lashes are really iPads are golf. And finally, land is just built different because of the mentioned built upside down. It's work. So I will note that this brushwork is a lot more giving it that. Here's really the main part of the show. A lot of the stylization in eyes comes from the eyes because it's the main focus of the face and it's usually intensive. There are 3 parts to the iris. Outer ring is usually just the side compared to the they are slightly as well as soft as the edge. It's a bit yes, even if you're doing the style, I think this is a good technique because you don't want contrast to be too strong there. I have known that Suki uses low contrast and colors for the iris, as you can see here, and this is the main reason the eyes look so comfy Additionally, along the arms to add just to make the transition a little smoother. This also makes the eye look and severe. You can see in this photo reference, the iris is blurred out, the edges not. While the middle part is always a gray yellow. This combined with the pupils are a great way to add details. Usually the pupils can help with reinforcing expressions as well. Smaller ones are associated with high alert, fear, and anxiety, while bigger ones portray innocence and affection. Lamb uses the pupil to add in all sorts of patterns to the eyes, while in Chloe's case, they're re-emphasized. Actually, let's take a second to look at her irises because they're absolutely sculpting with these patterns. I tried to emulate them myself. I would note that the liquify tool is really useful here to emulate that swirling. You just want to make sure to curve that this to emphasize that 3D effect we're talking about. A lot of it is just understanding translucent objects, which directly ties into the next topic. The main shadow is the cast shadow from the upper pictures. Most of the time, there's some shapes like this more consistent in its work, but sometimes they can intricate and detailed in its work, which shows up as reflections in the eyes. Of course, you probably don't need to go this far unless it's like a shot or something, but it's good to know.
Don't have to brush.
Editing this brush here, I feel like this script is a little dry to add it. So I asked ChatGPT for help, and I think
Let's find
is
that.
trying hit subscribe, shade with catch you next time. Absolutely. Anyways, the highlights are placed on the iris depending on the sources coming from. Brightest highlights go on the direction the source is. So if it's here, then the highlights should be here. This is a direct reflection of the light source. But because the iris is translucent, this is why you always need a dark to light transition in animals like this. Well, one of the reasons is because you've got that cast show, but most of the time the lights are placed above the character, especially if it's. This means that the light passes through the eye this angle and causes this glow called subsurface gathering at the bottom. You see this especially in lighter colored eyes as well. Chloe's marble eyes demonstrate this as you can see the subsurface gathering at the bottom of the eyes. Then highlights and any light reflections at the top. An easy way to recreate the reflections is to use a light reduce opacity, then you can shape you want for it. Together with the cast shadows and the iris, this simple technique will make the eyeballs look. Randy takes this on the beach by also doing gradients with soft shadows going across the sclera as well, giving the eyes a by this point, you should have a pretty convincing looking eye, and here's what I have right now. It feels like it's still missing some, whether it's a subtle highlight or a crazy pattern that defies the laws of physics. Each of these artists have a way of adding a fine to the eyes. Even if it's subtle in Randy's work, the glow and highlights are the things that bring the eyes to life. Color choices are especially important here because you want a complementary color to contrast against the base of the iris like this. There's that hard eyes that surely everyone's familiar with. Small pupils like this actually stand out as well, so you don't need to add much here. We talked about the marble texture in Chloe's eyes, but pupils are also a popular choice. Just make sure that they're subtle so they don't end up competing with the rest of the eye too much. Aside from the iris, which is obviously Lamb's favorite spot to mess with, they actually almost look like this here. Areas surrounding the eyes are also a good way to add details. Makeup, tattoos, kanjis, and blushes are a good way to reinforce the vocal point. We talked about color choices. Is to use 2 or 3 colors and use the strong complementary colors very, very, very sparingly. See in the E6, it seems like there's a lot of but it's kept very attention. And for Lamb, the iris is surprisingly simple. There's not much crazy rendering. If we compare it to Omnisport, for example, the rendering happens around around the irises. You can see that the anatomical details are much more fleshed out here. The corners of their even the eyelid folds are drawn down meticulously. And of course, eyes are just a part of the puzzle. If you struggle more with the face as a whole, I did a full video breakdown of faces here that you should definitely watch next. It covers everything from anatomy all the way to stylization. Subscribe.
Interesting.
In this video, you're probably familiar with the endless liquefying and adjusting. The truth is, there's so many hidden little things we're potentially screwing up when it comes to faces, and in this video, I'm going to break this cycle by studying 10 programs ranging from top illustrators to serialized mangakas to find out all the hidden tricks they use to draw perfect faces every single. First off, there's a second feature aside from the eyes, which we'll talk about. It's frequently overlooked in drawing faces. The mouth is the basic anime style is usually simplified as well. And let me tell you, simple doesn't mean easy, because depending on how you draw the mouth, it reveals a lot of the gaps in your knowledge about drawing the face. There's one single mistake you see in it shows up in notes. Draw Pro, Illustrator, Lee Flag, and Kuroshiro are both masters at drawing the face. In these examples, there's a common that's missing from drawings, and that's the curve of the face. Here's some basic facial anatomy for you to get started, and for that, I'll need some assistance from my good friend John Skulls. As you can see, the entirety of the skull is round to varying degrees. The forehead is pretty round, that squares up as we go down to the eye sockets and cheekbones, and finally, as we travel down further to the teeth and the jaw, you can see that they're almost. So, drawing faces ourselves, it's very useful at the beginning to imagine or at least have an idea of this to remind ourselves of it. And that's why we need construction. I know for a fact that it's like to start this, but after studying these two artists, I can very confidently to draw the face in this instead. And here are the reasons for it. It's no secret that we as humans are very tuned to our own species' facial proportions and but that's why perspective and proportions are crucial here, because the slightest mistakes can lead to devastating results. By drawing the head shape first, we establish the overall orientation of the head, which allows us to define the perspective and proportion lines earlier. To do this, you have to remember a few key points. Having the orientation at the center of the head defined makes it so much easier to place the mouth in. Remember the curve of the mouth as well. And after this, we just need to know which height to place it. And I personally find this proportion chart very useful to refer to whenever I draw faces. But do note that this changes depending on perspective and just a quick tip for perspective, I recommend flipping the canvas along like 5 times more than you think. If you're starting to feel like I'm flipping too many times, it's just forget it. We talked a lot about the close mouth features for now. The nose is probably the least emphasized feature of the face, especially in the anime style. But that doesn't mean you should neglect it completely. These drawings by you can see how it is to give the face at least especially maybe three-dimensional. And even though you don't see it draw too much from the face on perspective, it becomes increasingly to support the features on the face when the head is away from the canvas or there's direction lighting up. That's why you should never ever see the nose, because the nose is protruded on the face of features. It catches light very easily. That's why you see to do this. Understanding the basic form can have this shape to use for the battle of the nose. Speaking of the nose, Ishida Sui, the author of Tokyo Ghoul, has a varying degree of that he likes to draw his characters alongside the mouth. These features can convey emotions. It's pretty hard to convey gut-wrenching emotions on the face. So that's why we usually see manga artists use to draw the characters depending on the situation. Another notable artist is John Kafka. We've seen examples from Kuroshiro on how to use simple leg shapes to indicate the form of the nose instead of drawing lines to represent anime styles. John uses soft shadow shapes and then the form. These are mainly stylistic stylistic choices, which I'll go into more detail in a second in this video, but for now, let's move on to the eyes. Aside from perspective, which I have already covered earlier, there's also rotation like this that you can watch out for, especially in the 3 angles above or below. So there's this concept called 3 which basically means upturn and downturn. Typical local tsundere will while gentle as to waifu that's unfortunately considered adorable. So this might sound obvious, but you might want to keep the rotations between 2 eyes consistent. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Now, Kuroshiro has my work at sketches because these eye shapes are really everything that's characters. In these examples, you can see how Kuroshiro's to a sentence form. This step is useful at the beginning to help us focus on figuring out placement of the eyes. If you follow the video so far, then you should already have the head and the rotation. But here, you just have to place the eyes in. I find it easier if the shape is more bulky and angular. Again, you want to know that there's a curve at the eyes, even though it's not as extreme as the mouth. Just a quick fire of some really common moves for the eyes. One eye apart for the distance between the eyes, one eye to the tip of the ears, and the inner corners of the eyes aligned with the outer corners of the mouth. This often means that we'll have to do multiple passes to have to find it. It's better than the endless guessing and finding it. You obviously need some perspective skills here and understanding some eye references. I have a video on perspective here where I broke down perspective to 7 different skill levels that anyone can master. So definitely check it out. Okay, so final ingredient for eyes is this thing here. The eyes are placed in a stick, and there's a slight indent here below the brow. The more pronounced brow is usually found in a masculine, mature-looking characters, and vice versa. If you want your characters to appear more feminine and young, you should make this region full. This is especially important detail to you're dealing with shadows to that area also affect the final. The deeper shadows that area appear to have, which will give the character a darker, serious look, and final placement is also particularly the height of the higher placement eyebrows can make the character appear more feminine as well. So in short, to draw so you should go for higher than larger eyes and less than that. And the flip side, sex and you should go for so far, I've covered some of the basics here, but we can and definitely should take things to the next level. Personal style traits adds flair, and we're going to look at how the rest of the book stylize the faces. Now, if you haven't followed so far, you should notice that there are several that we can tweak to create a face. We're going to look at 4 different groups for the section that each has distinct style when it comes to the face. This first artist should introduction. Hirohiko has a pretty realistic style, especially in the anime. What makes this art style is the particular draws the entire upper region of the face. In almost all of his characters, there's this signature upturn around the brow here, completing the shape that's highlighted on the screen right now. You can see it in basically every face that he draws. So let's not forget the faces and lips that to draw. There's always a volumetric look to the typical style. Another thing that is the contour, the cheekbones, and he emphasizes these regions, giving the face a very chiseled look. Because the faces he draws are pretty consistent, our key strategy here is to use accessories and the hair to help distinguish between characters. Lamb is one of them that I've featured on the channel before. One thing you might notice here is as we move down the spectrum, the faces will get more simplified and caricatured. But in Lamb's case, the faces definitely still retain some distinct elements. For example, the volumetric look of the mouth, the tall details being of course, the eyes are the same examples of Lam's pieces, so let's see how Lam draws them. There's a common shape in Lam's work that goes like this. And this is exaggerated things in the eyelashes going along. And of course, a variety of colors and details jam-packed into a tight space to really sell them. This is just my own observation, but we also want to keep it doing fancy colors. But what I can tell, Lam usually limits the colors to no more than 3 to 4 hues at a time, and the distribution goes 70% base, 20% main, and 10% max. And Lam to relate the colors of different piece to the colors of the face being drawn here. You can see here how Lam perfectly executed the perspective and the drift of the face like what we just talked about. And this fundamental proficiency can be seen in his work as well. Just at first glance, I'm sure you can already tell that most of the characters in the draws have chibi looking faces. And the key here is the portraits. See, there's a huge difference between the faces that he draws and the movies. Instead of the angry face that he draws, softens the face take on shape. This would give the character a younger and cuter expression resembling a face. In a more realistic adult face, the proportions tend to go like this. The face is longer, and the features are more spaced out. But in Noob's work, the facial features are more squished together. As you can see here, as usual, the eyes are huge, but actually likes to draw half the eyes most of the time, giving the character natural facial expression. It might not look like much, but the mouth and the jaws are driving the motion of the expression. Look at that subtle curve of its face and the shyness and independence its shoe speaks around it. I highly suggest you to go look at this work after this video, to look at the mouths and the jaws. They're fully expressive and simplified. Continuing the big eyes trend, that's okay. Here are truly classic evidence. Robin's faces have perhaps the most unifying in all the characters in Itachi because K serialized body and hair. Yes, the hair. Although not as intense, I see some influence from the series where characters can eyes and styles as well. The structure of the skull is completely alien at this point, and even though they seem like they physics, and these faces still follow some basic rules, which makes sense. The spacing of the facial features is still pretty consistent with the rules we talked about earlier. The only difference is the size of the features, and what I really want to showcase here is how you want to stylize your faces. There are certain rules that you still follow that can. But the faces are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to creating interesting characters. Character design is a deep topic and it's impossible to cover everything in a single YouTube. This Skillshare class by the famous YouTuber Jazza covers exactly not only the skills, but all the basics of character design. Jazza's bright personality also made the class really engaging and fun. This other class might pose the expression of characters to bring out personalities. Covering this topic in a second, let's go check out the class. Skillshare is the largest online thousands of classes of industry experts. Various topics like film, illustration, design, TV, and business. Not only are the classes curated thanks to features like each of these classes are also carefully designed to maximize your experience. Yes, these guys know that learns faster than doing. So create and share projects to get feedback. Skillshare, which is a really good way and retain the information you just learned. I know to get some extra marketing before. So that's why Skillshare offers a trial for the first month. Description box with Skillshare is sponsoring to really bring things to the next level. And this is that final step to draw great faces like this. I want you guys to face moves. I won't go into details of how each of the facial muscles, but remember the general principles on how you should approach drawing facial expressions. So I would say there are 3 main things of the face, and each of these areas contribute to showing different emotions on the face. Similarly to the other parts of the body, something moves on the face, it's usually a pull and a squish effect. This will create an extra layer of details which should be faces that were drawn, mainly on how the skin folds in certain areas as the face moves. These are also hotspots for wrinkles if you enjoy drawing image. Shion Kim, a character designer and concept artist who has worked on things like Big Hero 6 and Spider-Verse, is a master at this. Let's go through a few examples here. During a deep scowl, eyebrows together, creating these skin folds. The movement of the jaw here also created a fold at the cheeks as the muscle contracts. Elegantly here. When the character is genuinely smiling, the face relaxes, so the bottom half of the face squishes upwards like this, creating a smile. Notice how this is squished into the eyes as the mouth of the cheeks pushes upwards. I'm sure we all can intuitively tell how an emotion correlates to its facial expression. You probably don't need to tell you if this face is happy or sad. If you do, that's why I want to highlight an important concept on how these modes create an extra layer of emotions on the face. The squish and pull method can also be used similarly to how to draw a pose. There's always this contrast of positioning. You can see it in these examples to some, where only one side of the face is squished and the other side is different movements of the eyelids here and the asymmetrical shapes of the mouth creates a much more engaging and interesting expression on the face. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be very exaggerated. Examples here with Shion Kim has just a slight bit of asymmetry at the eyebrows, but it's definitely more expressive straight face. So not only is asymmetry a visual tool to help us create more interest in the face, this concept can be used in storytelling and emotional aspect as well. You probably seen a character displaying a mix of emotions on the faces like this. According to this article, this concept about emotional asymmetry, when there's a genuine display of emotion, there will be a symmetry of emotion displayed on the face. The sides of the face should show emotions. So when you want to showcase a deep state of mind of the character, perhaps some sort of internal conflict, this is a great way to use facial expressions to bring it or hide the character's true intentions. Asymmetry is a great tool for its purposes, but if it's a genuine, heartfelt, pure rage, you want to keep it symmetrical and express that to the viewers. And some of the panels from Tokyo examples of this. Now, to practice drawing facial expressions, that's a really fun exercise that you can just go on Pinterest and search for faces. There's some pretty applications of the same asymmetry concept as well. As in Tokyo, particularly the protagonist showcases very internal struggle with school and itself. It's a lot of cool expressions and the human side often expresses different subtle emotions throughout the series. Of course, this falls into the realm of character design, so let's save that topic. Faces are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to drawing character. There's also the whole world of anatomy to go through, which is just as if not faces. I made a video studying Chinese anatomy expert Tenten, so make sure to check the video out here. All the fancy lighting and painterly art style, something fundamental about Dino's illustrations just catches your attention. How Dino poses characters is a really underrated aspect of his work. In almost every drawing, there's a different pose and a different angle. Even though a lot of these are study portraits, Dino still manages to make every drawing. His creative use of angles and the dynamic posing is what I'll be exploring in this video, as well as how Dino uses posing to enrich the story behind all of these drawings. Let's go. One of the reasons Dino is able to come up with so many unique poses is there's a context or story behind each painting. Fern is eating a donut, this girl is adjusting her glasses, Hugo is lifting her dress, trying to set over anyways, you get the point. It's far easier to come up with a pose when you have a backstory. When the characters are doing something, the pose just comes naturally. But there are also times where Dino doesn't add any apparent context to the drawing, like these very sitting poses. In cases like these, it's helpful to know a character is like, because even subtle differences in each of the characters can bring out their personalities effectively. It's personalities. Or even how the characters are feeling at the moment is not really limited to just their personalities. If the character is confident and outgoing, pumping up the chest, maintaining a more upright posture will help convey that personality. On the flip side, if the character is more reserved or introverted, they might take on more soft body language like this, where the arms are covering the torso. So yeah, context matters, and if you know what you're drawing, what they're doing, and how they're feeling, you're already 80% of the way there. Like I said, it comes naturally. But of course, things don't always go our way in life. Sometimes you have no idea what you're doing. And in these cases, it's very helpful to have cues to help us still draw interesting poses. To create a convincing pose, whether you're drawing from references or straight from the head like a savage, there are three things that you always want to keep in mind. In a lot of Dino's drawings, you notice a pattern. There's almost always foreshortening going on. No, not this kind of foreshortening, but more this kind. Okay, this is not very too friendly. Pay attention to the legs and the torso. This subtle way of posing the body to create the slightest foreshortening everywhere is making the piece a lot more interesting to look at. There's absolutely no reason why she would need to pose like that in that circumstance, but it's interesting to look at, and I think we all. Same thing here. See how her leg here is foreshortened in its angle as well as the entire body. These interesting camera angles and posing choices is what creates these eye-catching compositions, especially when there's a lack of story in the background. In most of these pieces I'm showing you, this is crucial to make a drawing more interesting to look at. In contrast, the characters in these pieces are dynamic and intentional. They're supposed to just sit there, so foreshortening is tough though. The best way for you to start incorporating some foreshortening in your figures is to imagine the body as a transparent object when you draw them. I'm sure you have practice or at least how artists use these bodies to practice the figure. It turns out these are really useful because you can arrange and rotate them around to create some sort of pose without having the pressure to draw the entire human body in. In addition to using these blocks, it's also really helpful to make a habit to draw them as a transparent object. Drawing is hard because 99% of the time things are blocking each other in these positions. This makes it very difficult to figure out how the bodies are connecting to each other or how the proportions are looking. You can see in this clip as Dino is constructing the figures here, see how these lines represents the shape of the pelvis, and these are these. I personally would need to draw the shoulder as well, where the head is blocking, and how the left shoulder and arm there to really figure out how to position them. But Dino's a pro, so oh wait, he did. See, even a pro does it. On top of that, drawing these wireframes are also really good to help you figure out exactly how the form is angled. This is especially useful when you're drawing cylindrical forms like the limbs, the neck, and the torso. Another huge thing that Dino likes to do is using hands and he's just flexing at his hand. No, but hands are the best tool you can use to use the expression of a character. This tends to invite a lot of foreshortening into a drawing, so they go hand in hand. No pun intended. This video is all about poses and movement, but a huge part that plays into why Dino's work are always so stunning is the lighting and rendering, which is a whole nother video on its own that I'll be working on next. So if you're interested, subscribe so you don't miss out on part 2 of this series. If you can master this tip alone, I guarantee you improve your figures buying in time. When we're drawing characters, we often only focus on one frame, one still image. But we forget that this is not how it is in real life. I know, shocker. These characters are supposed to move. There's a bunch of frames before and after the specific one that you're seeing on the screen. But how does this help us? Well, actively thinking about this pose as a series of movement, you gain a better understanding of how to position the body in a way that it makes sense. But before we dive into that, there are actually two kinds of poses: static poses and dynamic poses. Static poses are often poses where the character is idle, so sitting, standing, lying down, or handstands, while dynamic poses are moving poses, jumping, running, walking, or whatever this person is doing. Anyways, one way to think about continuity is thinking about how the character is interacting with gravity. Even in static poses like this, it's very natural for humans to shift their weight around to one leg. You rarely find people distribute their weight evenly when they're standing. This shift will reflect up the body to all sorts of imbalances like the pelvic, shoulder, toes here. It's like a chain reaction. Or walking poses like this. This is a perfect example of continuity. Nico here is doing a model right? See how her weight shifts onto the front leg as the back leg pushes off the ground, leading to this tilt in the pelvis, and the swing of the arms affects the shoulder here as well. All of these details built up to create a convincing illusion that the character is actually walking. And you can only do this by actively thinking about the movement as a series. One very useful tip is you should reference videos as well instead of just still images. The book Force by Michael Tessie illustrates this point very well. In the book, he explains how to approach figures by thinking about the direction of the force a figure is applying, as well as the intensity. It's easy to understand this principle if we look at extreme examples like punching or jumping. These actions require extreme amounts of force exerted by the body, so the movement demands most of the body parts working together like this to complete. But this exists in more subtle poses as well. For example, in this Asuka piece, she's adjusting her hat with some swagger. This detail of how her shoulders are aligned and how her back is slightly slacking, creating this S-curve, pairing with the hand on the waist, is just insane. Every little detail is so thought out. To see the force in this piece, you have to think about the motion of how Asuka is adjusting her hand. The hands are likely going through a circular motion like this, or up and down. That's how they adjust their hat. It makes so much sense to put the shoulders in a more forward position here. Similarly to the other arm here, because the hand is on the waist, this shoulder goes up a slight tilt up of the head, and this S-curve of the body, suggesting relaxed and confident. In this clip by Dino, you can see he almost always starts with establishing the gesture of the character. But another thing that Dino does is he oftentimes already has the lighting in mind when he's still in the sketching phase, evident from these lines. I'll show the version with lighting side by side to illustrate this point. You can see how these lines represent the shadow shapes on the figure. Same thing here. You can tell Dino already know that this is a shadow and the light is coming from the direction her back is facing. But okay, this is hard to do, particularly because you have to be really familiar with the form of the key. That's why I highly recommend this gesture drawing class by Siobhan from Skillshare. Not only is she an incredible teacher, this class is practical, useful knowledge for drawing a figure. There's also a suite of figure that you can check out here if you struggle with the structure side of the figure. Skillshare is the largest online learning community that houses a variety of classes on topics like entrepreneurship, design, video editing, and of course a metric ton of diverse options on art. This year, I personally want to improve my skills as an artist and content creator as much as possible. One of the ways to achieve that is to constantly learn and absorb new information. Not only are the classes on Skillshare taught by industry pros, they're also structured in a way that helps you maximize your learning experience. If you're like me, you learn by doing. On Skillshare, you can submit projects upon completing a class, getting feedback from your peers, so you're not just watching the videos mindlessly and so, if you're a serious creative looking to improve your skills in 2025, then I highly recommend you to check out Skillshare. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial. That's 30 days of absolutely free learning. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring the video. If you watch any videos about anatomy or gesture drawings, you probably came across terms like C-curves and S-curves, and these gesture lines are used in almost all of Dino's drawings. The goal of using these gesture lines is to create flow character, and I found that these curves can either be used on the structural aspect of the body, or they can represent the motion of the figure. Okay, that just sounds like a bunch of nonsense. For example, in this piece with who Dino refers to as power, there's a clean C curve from your head here all the way down to the pelvis. This curve is more so representing the motion of the spine. The structural case can be the C curve of the pelvis and the torso here. These C curves will always be here no matter how you position or rotate them. Interestingly, you can S-curve if you include her legs here. Okay, this is Sagiri from Hell's Paradise, and you can find a very cool C and S-curve being on top of one. You can also see an S-curve here if you include the hair. These contrasting curves just makes the silhouette of the figure really visually interesting to look at. Another case with Freeran, S-curve here in the hair, C-curve here, and C-curve here. They're really not that hard to find. But with all that being said, I don't think you necessarily start this way. Like, see here, hopefully by now some of you have connected the dots. These tips are meant to be incorporated into your workflow in order, kind of. You know, you start off with an idea, understanding the character, and then you come up with a pose. Using transparency and foreshowing to establish your rough pose, then you start doing more micro adjustments by paying more attention to continuity find these SM secrets. Why do multiple passes to work on each of these steps one at a time? And of course, you can also create more of these gesture lines with the help of accessories like hair and clothing. There's also this technique that you see in Dino's work with triangles, like in this piece here with zero. But this is more of a compositional technique that's very common in slow portraits. The way this works is you just want to frame things using lines or three focal points that form a triangle like this to keep the viewer's gaze on the page. And yeah, the most common setup is with two hands and head in a triangle. Another common is using the elbows, going back to the Oscar piece and very cool. Two beautiful triangles here. This Lucy piece as well, you can spot the triangle being formed. It's that points are aligning in a straight line like this. These are subtle decisions by Dino that ultimately created an aesthetic. I can go on here, but honestly, if you look at Dino's body of work yourself, you see these patterns everywhere. It's almost like a game where you're trying to find as many of these hidden techniques as possible yourself. This video was all about gestures and poses, but if you're someone that struggles more with the structure side of the figure, you can watch this video next where studied anatomy expert Tenten. The backbone of Dino's art style is, of course, the throughout investigations. I found many of Dino's hidden tricks, so I will use everything into 3 levels installed from very basics to complex lines. Say bones level as well as Dino very often does the first take sketches with just a character. It's, of course, his I have series, but Dino takes it very seriously, even if it's just is this invisible source that's present in let's assume for a second it's just white. So, this shifts the entire scheme. Take another piece that's you can see this front piece difference in value between shadow part and faces. But in this piece, Stalker and ambient, the value of the shadows of the drums, and it's important to pay attention to these shifts because this structure stick the character right back. So yes, this actually. I'm just gonna these drawings here. See the consistency of the style uses. It's almost like of course there are exceptions. For example, this piece that also face art Stalker does. This could be due to specific testing choice to express the dark steers because of the direction for light is different. This key light is coming from the top from the side. The cat shadow on the face makes it dark because the spirit is going to in a white situation, there's no sneaky perceive colors to the groups, so everything sticks back to the colors and values. One hand, this makes it easier to draw because you need to do gymnastics trying to figure out this extra stuff. Here, for other flat collections like this, Dino strategically uses brand values to spice up the contrast and strong. By using darker colors for the accessories on the character's clothing, Dino maximizes the entire value here, which helps with piece. You might think, okay, this is kind of simple. By just tweaking these two light sources, you can achieve a far range of results. It's a sort of hint of or too much ambient light the facelift. This works fantastic. It's because diamonds are to do these dramatic things. So the difference between intensity of the key light and this creates a really strong light and shadow contrast. You often hear artists say to focus on the shapes, but it's actually this subtle difference between face and valve. The shoulder here showcases the effect of a fall simultaneously redirecting focus to the face because white face contrasts against black hat. But the real trick here is how diamonds comes together to enhance the picture. There are two ways you can see how diamond is here. And this second is how diamond further pushes the focus up to the face. One lights like this and top lighting this is also pretty standard. Just a quick draw to the piece. In this piece, the ambient light is blue color. This stains the interior of the skin with subtle shading contrasting against red hair. This is basically color effect perceived color tears of flames off. And I'm really glad that such Skillshare is sponsoring the video because they have this it's glitter depth so the colors these exact objects color. Skillshare is a song photography, design, or art, especially art. Skillshare has plans just for you. These classes are carefully designed by industry professionals to help you experience, and each class is curated into a Skillshare course to demonstrate the skill. Skillshare also encourages you guys to share projects after this is Skillshare because it gets stuff it's passively still so it's best to get started since your first 500 people use the description see if they try out Skillshare again and give Skillshare for sponsor. One very useful way to learn this is to use software Studio has the built-in system but can easily use free options on its website to help you visualize certain connections. Once you have the rough set, this some sort of interpretation in mind that's just blind color. You're just spotting different directions, but the main expression is the three main questions here are speech light and color speech the lights have. Now I figures this out because different skip face together. Story. Notice how he uses blocks of colors connected the Japanese flat. This is obviously to what happens here to color. Nano adds colors after it figures out. This is great in maps or layer maps to add the colors in. For example, in this piece with fern, the first obvious key light comes from here that has and finally it's filled from the front to raise the right the entire scene. You know what's going on with shapes and shadows. So scene like this so there's source me from the outside. There's actually a source here. Yeah, it's weird how source of that how it's color here just it's like and you can see this again this piece key light here from the top left and you have the also have a dose of strong here because we can see the you notice by now it's each other, with intensity being highly mismatched. There's usually a much stronger performance of the piece and some support for some different. The colors of the a soft filler, so you get this complementary concept. I know that this makes some stuff which happens when it comes to the placements. Oftentimes it's best to use a sense of story and scene. Table and soft and comfort. Sometimes and this promise here is the bonus to really take things to the next level. That is a combination of past shadows and different edges to just rendering. For hard edge, soft edge, and gloss edge are the three types of edges that use composed. The piece Dino saves the hardest edges for and define between objects, since these create a large portion of the joint consists of either soft edges or these are useful for is rounded. For example, the edge here because the ball is rounded, but this edge is hard because it's a cast shadow. Soft edges are really useful here. That shadows from the window story so here correct space that's supposed to highlight the face down focus on the face here so that the big hat is a cast shadow over the face. As you tell, lighting is a powerful tool that can have storytelling so if you don't understand very things like 2D. So in this video, attempt to you switches to modes, more specifically system to affect composition to help me recreate this beautiful lighting style. If you watch any of my videos, you know that it's everything. So even it's very to the strengths of the curve. So lighting that is to use it as a tool to showcase the subject complete story in the and you see how this works in this blind cases. I won't get into crazy details of some very basic rules of consistency. Shade, like this simple yet elegant portrait, uses some before we go into maybe this. But in case you haven't seen that, give me exactly 45 seconds. Some so this line is so the transition line between them is called. There are readings of straight it bounces and it's a scene. When light bounces and shines back. It's called it's made of translucent material. It can pass through and be trapped inside for getting the flow. This is called subsurface scattering, and you get some also crevices this creates a dark spot. Let's go back to the piece earlier to give you in this piece, the light source is source shining. This creates a sake of focuses stuff all the shapes and details of these shapes and shapes and the shapes and if we compare these two areas, face has a much greater split into a smaller space. See how between this series we get sharp transitions. Let's talk about saturation. The color scheme of this piece is a simple but kind of uses saturation even the contrast is called scatter. Here you can see a subsaturation. The color scheme is this curve goes from desaturated to saturated to desaturated. But some of you shopper say, why is it this shape of this? If we use a color, there's clearly subsurface scattering, but they're not extra things. I suspect this is common using instant lessons to create contrast face and suppressing contrast. Slow motion is for instant face, just remember in a the light rays that super and this is the contrast. This area is the connection between this area and also makes sense for all of this pushes using this basic set. Let's but before that, this is cool. There seems to be something has to be perspective to create results. And that's where today's sponsor is Skillshare. Skillshare is the longest form. It's just like every single topic. Demonstration. There are 12 creative points who actually know what they're doing. Someone watching recently aside from doing these things, also been using Skillshare which both it's really well discussing because we don't understand from perspective. If you're a coding beginner and you're lost on which topics to pick, Skillshare something which is a set of characteristics. First, description below to join Skillshare. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring. This piece with Monkey Simpson is a few things going on. Once again, with a very simple set of concepts to create a set of shapes. Let's do another move here. You can see this the shapes of this piece. And the second choice is again. So this time though, it's placed on the top. So let's create a base here. This piece just like is of the juicy action happens. And there's this little the rest of this this circle is held different. We also get some shadow shapes here. This connects with the picture. Just have here. Again, we see the same silver scatter. Here if we use the get some surface.
Doing that.
Let's do the same. So, up here, some basic. Here we get this. Instead, source here is this. She's drawing this time we don't get the same because the source is so close. So the face is even juicy with very thing I didn't get is some sort of skin. This is James. So if you know showcases see how this time value is much little distances square. The intensity of it's actually as a terms. So it's anything that's facing source gets the same. See how as soon as the wings turn here in the it's seem to get some inconsistency. It's a center matching with the color center. This is also for it would actually make sense if just that same it's just but if we do it's so for instance chose to center and the original design is I don't know if this is just a fit. So yeah, it's really simple. Just make the shape and change it and then do the I would also give that base layer so details check out this thing. So choose a lighting so the key first just okay, so first off, I noticed that illustrations feels so I'm trying to say that's maybe the issue of it's just really similar. So I used the just did another frustration I had is figuring out it took me changing because she has got this whole time just trying to keep it so that It's very useful to have a saturation to check your values so you can go too far. And at the end here, change the background to a dark sense of face. If you're wearing something that's really nice, if everything is especially the structure.
Is an anime style illustrator, but not just any anime style illustrator. She is a master of light and shadow. When looking at her work, always stunned but beautiful and diverse light. So naturally, that's made me wonder, how can I do something similar? There are patterns in her process that to get similar results. So in this video, I'll be attempting to break down 6 different unique lighting scenarios, showing you how I've applied these techniques to my illustration text. I wanted to see if Rella's techniques can help fix my boring lighting. See, recently, looking back at my illustrations, I realized that I was using mostly the same lighting, the same kind of background. While that's not necessarily bad, it's missing that wow factor. That emotional impact can be seen in Rella's illustrations. Take this illustration for example. The usage of lights not only made it beautiful, calming, just magical. Ever since seeing this illustration, I've been dying to know how it was done. I was curious about what secret techniques I could learn. So I decided to break it down and try applying the techniques to my own illustrations. First off, I started with recreating the background, then add the base color. When you start with the background, it makes picking colors for the shadows much easier. The shadows, which was just one layer on multiply blend. First, filled in the whole layer, then erased parts to show the lights. Next, I added a second darker shadow to give the image more depth and form. I sometimes use block transparent pixels to do this, or just create a second multiply layer. Lastly, Rella likes to add glows, dust, and sparkles. Finish off the illustration by adding chromatic aberration. And that was it. That was so simple that it kind of scares me. Kind of there's only like 6 main steps to this. However, creating the illustration was the easy part. The hard part is to see if I can actually apply this to my own illustration text. To see if it's actually as simple as it looks, or if I'm missing some crucial steps. I started with the background. I did this quickly just to get the feel of the lighting. Then add the base color. And since the background is blue, the shadow will reflect the same blue color. When we isolate Rella's shadows, we have a clear understanding of how she shapes the lights. Here we can see big shapes informing us of the direction of the lights, smaller shapes for details like lights going through the hats. When I tried doing the same thing, I find adding light to be more straightforward and less intimidating. Thinking in shape hierarchies also make your composition more appealing. Now that we got the overall vibe of the image down, it's time to add details. And here's where things started to fall apart. You see, when I compared my drawings to Rella's, I started to get really worried. While Rella's already looked super polished, mine just looked flat. Despite that, I continued with adding the darker shadows, just like Rella. But when I did that, it somehow looked even worse. Maybe I should add a mouse light to fix it, right? But how much should I add? Is it too much? Is it too little? No matter how many times I tried adjusting the illustration, it just doesn't have the same feeling as Rella's illustrations. Not that it's a bad thing, I actually think that this turned out alright. But I felt frustrated when it comes to adding shadows and mounts. I understood how to do it. I couldn't understand why or where to add it. I had the technical skills, but lacked fundamental knowledge to use them effectively. Then it hit me. Techniques alone won't solve my lighting issues. It's the deeper understanding of theory which enables for flexibility and creative freedom down the line. So I decided to properly study lights and shadows. As for how, I found this book which perfectly complements Rella's techniques, answering many questions I had during my study. Let's keep this short. Color Light is a book by James Gurley. For the next 50 seconds, I'll show you my main techniques. First are the 8 different types of light sources, with 5 often used by Rella. I had no idea clouds played such a big role in colors. Just look at how it changes the colors of the sky. Talking about clouds, do you want to know what the sky is blue? Yeah, me neither. But apparently it's pretty important. This was due to
Rayleigh scattering.
sunlight, which is made of many colored waves, scatters when it interacts with the atmosphere. Blue light scatters more due to its shorter wavelength, therefore less atmosphere results in more lights, while a bigger atmosphere, reduce blue color. Other than the sky, there's different types of character lighting. Half shadow, 3/4 lighting, frontal lighting, edge lighting, punter joy, and spot lighting. I finally understood things that I thought were important: form shadow and cast shadow. Knowing the difference between the two will help you make better shading decisions. And armed with basic understanding of light and color, I'm excited to dive back into the study and apply what I've learned. After a sunny scene, it's time to try something new. I decided to break down this image due to its simplicity, starting with background, base color, shadow, lights, and then some details. So let's dive into each while applying it into my own intent. I began with the night sky, which was just a gradient. Then stars using the default spray brush. And added base color and shadows, which really help put the characters into the scene. When picking colors for the shadows, I like to just eyedrop the background color, then adjust it from there. In Rella's illustration, you can see a darker gradient for parts of light cannot reach, and after adding that with the soft brush, pretty much halfway done. Next, it's time to add the lights. Rella likes using crisp white lights in her illustrations. Here, the white light is coming from a hidden light source behind the character. Although, initially, I thought that this white light was the moonlight. After some research, I realized that that's not possible. Thus, the illustration is set in space, where there's no atmosphere. So when it comes to the night scene, you can decide between a hidden light source or that the whole scene is set in space. Here I use add blend lights, since I find it to be the most versatile style. Don't forget to also add this colored lights, which I'm assuming to be light bulb. Couple steps where they add the shadows and details, those iconic busts and sparkles. Made a custom brush for the sparkles, which you can download. Don't forget to also add some. That was it. Wait, that was it. This looks kind of bad. So I decided to add some flowers and all layers to make it interesting. And here's how it turned out. I think the downfall of this image wasn't the lighting, but instead composition, camera angle, this awkward pose, which resulted in the fast looking character. Technique-wise, I think I did the fundamentals that also helped you, especially with identifying where this light was coming from. And I think the next step now is to test whether techniques that I just learned can also be used in the scene of completely opposite lights. So let's try to find that out in Rella's smart lights palette. Now, the majority of the character is engulfed in light. To do this, I started with the same steps. Background, base color. Background here was supposed to be a wall, so I added a cast shadow to show just that. Next, I added soft shadows to show the form of the character. Lighting, I decided to go with an intense circular spotlight. I did this by painting a circular light on top of the character and the background. This lighting scenario is often used to create a environment tone, which is perfect for the more mysterious vibe that I'm doing. My light source is coming from around here, so I'm adding shadows around the top part of the character. The sharpness or the softness of shadow depends on the distance and angle of the light. Shadows closer to the light will have crisper edges, while those further away will appear softer. At this point, I had to look and feel the image down, so it's time to add the details. I noticed in Rella's work that areas in strong light often have fewer details. This was because the intense lighting eliminates the shadows, resulting in an overload effect. So I made sure not to add too much details to the areas closer to the light source. Once all that was done, I added Rella's iconic dust particles. I used Gaussian blur and grain to emulate the effect of camera in low lighting. Finally, chromatic aberration to wrap things up. I'll be honest, I have no idea how it turned out this well. I'm really happy with the outcome, but despite that, there's still a lot of flaws when it comes to the process. On the technical side, I feel like the hair could have been better. It's still quite flat compared to Rella's. On the theory side, this lighting scenario was still a big mystery to me. I managed to get to this point, all thanks to having Rella's artist real-life photos as references for lights, shadows, colors. Without those things, I wouldn't have been able to do this. While the color and light book helped me zoom out and understand basic theories, now I need help with zooming in and focusing more on lights and shadows in specific scenarios. And I think I got just the thing. Guide for Visual Artists is a book by Richard Biot, which focuses on different lighting scenarios. We got frontal, side, back, above, below, explanation of every single sky you could think. Oh wow, look at this one. Maybe I'll try this. Sections on shadows, indoor lights, and materials. But I actually got this book just to read this section on specific lighting scenarios. So after going through all of them, I just went straight to applying them on the next attempt. The stage light. The stage light's signature feature is definitely this rim light effect, and the secret to achieving this effect lies in the background, which is often black to allow the rim light to stand out from it. So you know the usual steps. Decided the light will come from above, so I added a slight gradient to the shadow to give a sense of form. Then it's time to add the index. The rim light, I tried keeping it super thin and minimal, not adding more than necessary. The light was also so strong that it created this glow effect where it's in contact with the surface. Any dust particles passing through the lights will also pop out. Here on, I tweaked the image as I saw fit, adjusting things like contrast, hue, and saturation. In case you're wondering, here's how my layers look. It's quite simple and straightforward. At this point, my illustration was done. Well, not really, because I have an idea that I've been dying to try. A while back, I saw this video by the illustrator, Retrix. I was inspired by how beautiful the three elements blended in with his 2D illustrations, and I wanted to try something similar. So since the beginning of this attempt, I plan to do just that with the 3D skills that I learned in my previous video, which could either look really cool or total disaster. Anyways, what I did was model the 3D elements. It's some composition stuff. Don't know to do next. Look up all the tutorials on YouTube. Do whatever the tutorials tells me to do. Then render it out, put it in Photoshop, and I hate this. So I did this, that's, and this, and that's, and this, and that. And somehow it actually turned out really good. My goal is to take advantage of the beautiful fractions made by the 3D software in order to enhance the beautiful stage lighting, which I think was a success. Although this lighting was beautiful, I think the next one is prettier. Colors of the sky during sunset are often vibrant and complementary. Depending on the clouds or lack thereof, results in sunset, typical orange blue to golden hours to the beautiful orange. The inspiration for this attempt came from this photo. I love the unique angle so much, I decided to build a whole scene based on this photo. When it comes to the background, I'll be honest, I didn't want to draw it, so I chose to use Unreal Engine to make the sky. This also allows me to easily adjust the time of day and cloud model. Otherwise, you could always take your own photo or grab one from somewhere else. I find that having a reference of what you're going for will make your life much easier. Shadows, I added a greenish blue to the whole, then added orange glow to the bottom to reflect the color of the sun. To help the characters stand out from the background, I added a rim light similar to what we did previously. At this point, the main lighting was in place, so now it's time to add details and polish things up. Colors here felt a little bit dull, so I wanted to make it more vibrant. I was experimenting with the hue, saturation, and contrast, but I accidentally made this. I instantly fell in love with the colors, and decided to stick with this. And although this was no longer a real sunset, the lighting is still based on the principle of a sunset. Add some finishing touches, I added colored glows to the top and bottom of the camera, maybe because I thought it was cool. I also really like how Rella paints over the color of the sunset. It's a really subtle effect, which was very effective at showing the intensity of the light. It added stars and rays to it. And finally, good old chromatic aberration. And this might be my favorite outcome from this. I was happy with how I was able to transform stylized illustration as a piece, thanks to having a solid understanding of the lighting. I wasn't able to go over everything, so if you want to take a closer look, you can download the files for yourself. As for the final lighting, I'm not sure what to categorize it as. For now, let's call this dapple light. Because I want to focus on the simple, yet often seen in anime illustrations, where the bright sun shines through leaves or clouds, creating this unique contrast between light and shadows. As well to do this, I think you already know. This time, the shadow will take on the shapes of leaves or clouds. You could draw this yourself, or again, grab an image from somewhere like Unsplash and set it to multiply blend. For now, this is just a placeholder. By doing this, you're essentially getting yourself to that 80% mark without having to do much. I then added the second shadow, which I kept very minimal. I like Rella's use of pinkish glows around the lights. It It's a nice touch that makes the image feel that much more calming and sentimental. So I did something similar, pushing the area light with a pinkish glow. I was going for a cuter style for this attempt, so aside from some shadows and glows here and there, I really didn't have to do much. So I was happy with the overall look of the image. I played around with the shadows to see which one I liked the most. Put this image side by side to Rella's, I realized that there wasn't enough contrast between the lights and shadows. So I fixed that using curves and brightness sliders. Lastly, I added some out-of-focus flowers to guide the viewer's sight. Added dust and chromatic aberration to finish everything off. Yeah, and that was it. By far the simplest, yet so impactful. I decided to keep things simple, to let the juxtaposition between light and shadow be the star of the image. And that's the power of lighting. So what exactly did I get out of this 2-month study? In the beginning, I began by mimicking Rella's workflow on the side, trying to grasp what makes her artwork so beautiful. I quickly realized that copying techniques alone won't get me far. I had to solidify my understanding through studying fundamentals. By the end, I was able to use what I learned to craft my own approach to lighting or to make it fit my vision. And the best part, I finally learned how to give my illustration missing impact. That's wow factor I've been searching for. As always, thanks for watching.
Oh, see. Okay. What's up, man? Bryson? What's up?
Your soda pop is just a fad. You'll see.
The Sasha boys have gone completely viral after that variety show. They even have their own fan.
Mm.
Stop it!
Alrighty then, guys, I shall be calling it a night. Leave us for now. Thanks for coming. Thank you, thank you. I'll be heading out. You guys rock.